I personally feel most of the beauty of ARRI comes from its color, and we saw that in the previous video. But is it possible to recreate ARRI look without an actual ARRI in the same scene as your Sony? Well, short answer is no, because without an actual ARRI in the same scene, it is extremely difficult to predict how ARRI responds to color in your location. But there is a way, and the result is pretty good. Hi mate, I'm Wade from Tomonoma, based in Japan. As a visual artist and marketer, I think about images differently. Not just how they look, but why they work. Now, a lot of people are interested in getting the ARRI color. Obviously, the easiest way to do it is to buy an Alexa, but that's only possible for some people. So the question is, how can we do that without an actual ARRI? This video covers a lot of things and might be overwhelming at times because we're gonna go through all the stuff, including some topics that seem unrelated at first, but will all connect in the end. I hope this video will be as interesting as the previous video, so grab a coffee, get comfy, let's get into it. When it comes to recreating ARRI look without an ARRI, some people say CSD, color space transform, will get you there, like converting your S-Log3 to ARRI Log-C and ARRI Log-C to Rec 709, and done, ARRI. Well, it's kind of misleading because CSD converts the color space, but it doesn't change how the camera captured and interpreted color in the given situation. For instance, this is a Sony clip, CSD'd to ARRI. Does this look like ARRI? The answer is up to you, but this is what actually came out of an ARRI. Another misconception I sometimes see is that ARRI is just a bunch of green tint, meaning if you add tons of green to, say, Sony footage, it's gonna look like ARRI. At first sight, yes, it feels like ARRI, but watch carefully. The white areas are messed up. If you take a look at the ARRI, it feels green, but the white areas remain intact, which you can tell from the waveforms too. Sony looks like you just put a green filter in front of the lens, and adding green uniformly across the board sacrifices the color separation and dimensionality that comes with it. So just adding green to the image doesn't really work here. Of course, a proper grading will fix that though. Still, ARRI's green is more harmonized with the image, and it's more delicate than it looks. Plus, not just green or teal, there are many more differences in how ARRI interprets color, just like you saw a few examples in the previous video. Here's a bit more about why CSD doesn't change how camera captured and interpreted color. I'll explain in a very simplified way. So, before the sensor's raw data is placed into a color space, it's already gone through a process like demosaicing and color correction matrix and more. Take demosaicing for example. Demosaicing is a process that turns the mosaic pattern RGB information from a sensor into a full color image. What do you mean? Well, first of all, each pixel captures only one color, R, G, or B. So when they express colors, they talk to their neighboring pixels about their amount of photons they received from a scene. In this case, red guy's neighboring blue was weak and green was so-so. So the red guy found out he should be this kind of orange based on his neighbors, because green got a decent amount of intensity of photons and blue got little. So that way they can express any color, not just RGB. So going back to it, demosaicing is a process that turns mosaic pattern RGB information into a full color image. But how RGB pixels express colors varies among manufacturers. They have their own algorithm behind it. For example, ARRI has ADA5 for Alexa series or Amira series and ADA7 for Alexa 35 series, while demosaicing mostly affects fine detail, edges, or textures. But there's another step that creates color across the image, color matrix. Raw RGB values after demosaicing don't really match how we actually see color. So the color matrix remaps them into something feels natural. And this is where each manufacturer's color character comes from. And these processes up to this point can be undone by the CSD. Now in the next chapter, I'll explain the definition of words, so everyone will be on the same page. Feel free to skip it if you're not interested. Please give me 2 minutes to define 3 words that I often use in this video. Emulate, recreate, match. Because everyone takes these words differently. The dictionary says emulate is to imitate the function or behavior of something as closely as possible. Recreate is to make something look or feel like the original. Match is to make one thing equal or correspond to another. Even though these 3 words don't really define the level of similarity numerically, let me define them like this. Emulate is 85% of similarity, recreate is 95% of similarity, and match is 99% or even higher similarity. To put it extremely simple, imagine the colors of this world as 100 colored pencils. 85 of them look the same as a result of emulate, and 95 of them look the same in recreate, and 99 pencils look the same in match. I'm not gonna measure the similarity of ARRI recreation in this video, but it's useful to define the nuance behind these words because some people consider something like 70% of similarity to be enough to say it looks like ARRI, while others wouldn't really say so, even at 95%, which is, by the way, the target similarity we're aiming for with recreate. Okay, so now that we know the nuance, let's take a look at how the recreation goes. So how can we recreate the ARRI color? We're gonna use Sony FX3 as an example. At phase 1, mathematically converts Sony footage to ARRI using the same color chart to match the 2 clips. At phase 2, interpolate the colors that aren't on the chart, based on many more actual ARRI clips. At phase 3, adjust the look in DaVinci to get even closer to ARRI. I've already done a phase 1 and phase 2 for you, so all you have to do is phase 3. But let me explain what I do at phase 1 and 2 for anyone who's curious. At phase 1, I record this color chart on both ARRI and FX3 at 5500 Kelvin daylight spectrum. Then I import the clips into softwares like 3D LUT Creator, which supports this specific color chart, and match the 2 clips, and export the matching data as a LUT. By the way, color matching using the color chart works like this. When you record this red patch with both ARRI and Sony, you will see how differently they handle and respond to this red. So once you know the difference, you can close the gap between this camera, this Sony and ARRI, and make the Sony look like ARRI. But that's only for red. So it goes like, what about blue? What about lime green? What about this orange? And so on. And you might be wondering why I use this not so common color chart with so many color chips on it. Well, that's because the more colors you have, the more reference points you get. And having more reference points making matching easier and more accurate compared to the one with fewer colors. Plus, this one has a decent number of skin tones as you can see, and skin tones is what makes ARRI ARRI, and that's important for recreating ARRI look. But no matter how many reference color chips you have on this chart, reality has way more colors than this. Like there's an infinite number of colors between this red and orange. So at phase 2, I minimize the color difference between Sony FX3 and ARRI by analyzing how ARRI responds to color and interprets them in various situations with many actual ARRI clips. Painstaking work. Then I export this data as a LUT, combined with the one created at phase 1. Finally, at phase 3, after applying the LUT, we're gonna adjust the color and emulate the ARRI's unique softness by removing some of the digital harshness of FX3. You wanna see the result after all this? This is the result. It's not bad, right? Well, just so you know, I didn't match these 2 clips, comparing them side by side in post, because that defeats the purpose of this whole video. The point is recreating ARRI color, ARRI look without an actual ARRI in your location. If you have an ARRI and a Sony or a Canon, a Lumix, they're all in the same scene, it's not that difficult to match 3 cameras to ARRI because you already have an answer of how ARRI handles color in your location. That said, you still see a little bit of difference on the back wall. I mean, on the white door, the white looks a little bit different between Sony and ARRI, you know. And also this area looks different. And you might spot other difference, but that's the biggest difference I saw in this situation. And this kind of difference can be either bigger or smaller depending on what kind of location you are, because there's a catch in recreating ARRI color with LUTs. I think it's really important to know. So I'm going to talk about this in the next chapter before getting to the actual procedure. Using one of these charts to create a matching profile is pretty common, but let's not forget to factor in the light source this chart is illuminated by. Even under the same 5500 Kelvin of light, the color chips look different. For instance, light A, light B, and light C, they were all accurately set to 5500 Kelvin with a colorimeter, but the color chips look different. This is because the spectral distribution of each light is different. Well, spectral distribution is about how the light is actually composed. For example, this 5500 Kelvin white light is a pretty neutral white, but under the hood, it contains an infinite number of different colors, including red, green, yellow, whatever colors you name it. And how each light is composed can vary a lot. Alright, I get the idea, but how does the spectral distribution thing actually affect things? Well, a camera sensor, as well as human eyes, capture color of objects through the reflection of light. Without reflection, nothing can be seen in the first place. But what is the object actually reflecting? It's the light coming from the light source. So what happens if there is a difference in spectral distribution between light sources? You're essentially shining a different quality of light onto the object, so the color reflected back from the object changes accordingly. This is why the same color chips look different under light A, B, and C. Speaking of that, cheap LEDs or fluorescent lights often have a spiky blue peak and less red output. Good light sources have a more balanced spectrum, which gives you a better color reproduction. So the point is, colors look different under different quality of light. That means if I record this color chart with light A to make a matching profile, but you applying the LUT to your clip captured with something like light C, we have a different condition. The LUTs might not work that well, and your footage might not look like ARRI as much as it's designed to make. So it's ideal to use the same light source as the LUTs were created. So what light source did I use? I used the sun, because the sun itself emits a consistent spectrum, and it's one universal light source we all share, unlike millions of LEDs out there whose quality varies. But that doesn't necessarily mean that daylight is always consistent, because by the time this daylight reaches your location, a lot of factors change along the way. One of them is sun's height. When the sun is low like this, like early morning or evening, light has to pass through more atmosphere before it reaches you. These blue lines are atmosphere. Compared to this, right? This is longer and this is shorter. And when it travels, this extra atmosphere scatters away blue contained in daylight. This is, by the way, daylight. There are a lot of colors, but this is what makes daylight. It looks like white, but under the hood, it contains a lot of colors, you know? And when the blue contained in a spectrum scattered, because of the atmosphere, the light becomes more warmer, right? So early morning or evening, daylight becomes warmer and redder, like so. And around the noon, the sun is the highest, so the light passes through less atmosphere. And that means spectrum stays more balanced, like this. And some people might think, okay, so this daylight is warmer and this daylight is more neutral. So, okay, this is, let's say, sunrise is 3500 Kelvin and this sun is 5500 Kelvin. Then why don't I just, adjust the white balance in the camera for this temperature and get the neutral white? And that's how color temperature works in camera. And you're right, you get neutral white in both daylight. But what hasn't changed is how these daylights are composed. This daylight and this daylight, they are different quality. So like I said before, the objects are lit by different quality of daylight, and that's something to keep in mind. On a similar note, the spectrum also changes when it's raining, sunny, cloudy, or foggy. Each one scatters and filters sunlight differently. Even direct sun and open shade are different light sources. In direct sun, you're getting the sun's purer spectrum, but in shade, you're mostly lit by scattered blue light coming from the sky instead. And you'll have a slightly different spectrum on the ground. As for the chart, I recorded it in diffused direct daylight when the sun was around 5500 Kelvin, and I had my camera's white balance set to 5500 Kelvin as well. So the takeaway here in this chapter is that there are some factors that changes how color looks, and there's always a limit to recreating every color. But as long as you shoot in 5500 Kelvin daylight spectrum in this case, I think you can get about 95% similarity. That said, when your camera's white balance is set to 6500 Kelvin on a different daylight temperature, you can still emulate some of the ARRI feel. It's just that the farther you get away from 5500 Kelvin daylight condition, the less accurate the result may be. I'll show you real-world Sony footage with the LUTs applied at the end of this video. More about the matching profile or LUTs right after the next chapter. By the way, colorimeter appears from time to time on my channel. It's kind of a spectrometer that analyzes light by breaking it down wavelength by wavelength. When you measure the light, you get a spectrum, showing which wavelength and how much of it is contained. For example, 650 nanometer is more of red, and shorter wavelength like 470 nanometer is more of blue. Well, wavelength itself doesn't have any color. Color is just a result of interpretation by our brain. Anyway, colorimeter tells you a lot about light. Like I said before, bad light has poor spectral quality, oftentimes lacking sufficient output in the 650 nanometer to 750 nanometer range. And this range contains deep red and far red, both of which are important for rendering healthy skin tones, which is a big theme in cinematography. You can make healthy skin tones look unhealthy in grading, but the other way around isn't so easy, because you can't bring back what's not there in the first place. That's why it's important to care about the light. Good lights usually have a strong CRI, color rendering index, like 90A or 99, and sometimes high-end lights come with SSI, spectral similarity index, that's stricter color evaluation system, but those tend to be really expensive. The best quality light that everyone has access to is the sun. It has smooth, continuous spectrum, and it renders skin tones beautifully. That's why I chose the sun as the reference light when creating the LUTs. To begin with, please download ARRI Perceptual LUTs 5500 Kelvin Normal FX3 from my website. Link in the description. Once you download it, open up DaVinci And for this, we're gonna work in ACES workflow since the LUTs were made in ACES and it's expected to be used in the same setting. I'll explain later what the ACES is in the first place and why I chose that. So let's just go through the setting for this workflow. Open up color management. And for color science, choose ACES CCT. And ACES version is 2.0. And leave the ACES AMF as is, so it's none. And ACES input transform is, for now, just choose no input transform. ACES output transform is Rec 79 BT1886. Process node LUTs in ACES CC AP1 timeline space. After you import your clip, in the color page, right-click on the clip and find ACES input transform. Select your camera and choose a recording format. In this case, it's Sony FX3, so Sony and S-Log3 S-Gamma3 Cine. Now it's converted to Rec 79 to show you what it looks like, but under the surface, you're working in wide gamut AP1 color space. Moving on, this is what the Phase 3 node tree looks like after all the steps. I'll walk you through one by one. We're gonna use this clip. In this scene, I overexposed the footage and brought it down in post to have a cleaner shadows. So there is already a node before the LUT node, but I'm going to proceed assuming you've already done basic color correction before the LUT node. So first of all, apply the LUT to this node and see how it changes the color of your scene. To me, it's very close to how ARRI would normally interpret color. But one thing I'm not totally sold on is the color of the tree shadows. Teal is okay, but the saturation is a little bit too much. The intensity of blue or teal depends on the condition of atmosphere and the sun, like I explained earlier. So there's no fixed answer for how saturated the shadow should be. There's no universal answer, but in my experience, it should be toned down a little bit. That's something only experience and actually being there on the location can tell you. So I go to Hue versus Saturation tab and select this range. I include bluish green too, not just blue, because this LUT tends to slightly boost green saturation as well. So if you like it as is, you don't have to touch anything. But if you feel too much because you're using warmer lens and a green effect might feel a little bit too strong, in that case, you need to adjust it. I just wanted to flag it in case you need to adjust it. Another thing to fix in this scene is a red car in the back. ARRI tends to interpret highly saturated red as cherry red or pinkish blue red, and it's doing a little bit too much here. So I go to Color Warper tab and switch to Hue Saturation mode and change the hue resolution from 12 to 24, saturation resolution from 6 to 16. Then I pick the red on the door. A red dot shows up. And in this case, move the hue in the slider from 0.04 to 0.03. Also, saturation feels too strong, so from 0.65 to 0.6. Lastly, the green is leaning towards bluish green, which is another ARRI's characteristic, but ARRI wouldn't make green this bluish, so add another node, and in the hue versus hue curve, place 2 dots in this wide range like this. And when you do so, careful not to accidentally move the dot like this. If this happens, come down to Hue Rotate and type in 0. Okay, back to it. Place a dot in the middle and drag it upward about 1 block. Okay, from here, we're gonna develop nice highlight roll-off to emulate that ARRI feel, but highlight roll-off is actually a tricky part because there's almost no useful information about what ARRI is doing about it. And as ARRI says, creating a good-looking roll-off in the highlights is probably one of the most difficult tasks for any sensor designer, and we have spent enormous resources on it. So it's impossible to recreate ARRI's exact highlight roll-off, but creating a nicer highlight roll-off for the digital looking highlights is possible. So for this, we need 2 nodes. First one is highlight compression. Go down to customer curve and press and hold Option key on Mac and Alt key for Windows. Place a dot somewhere around here. Grab the top dot and bring it down about 2 blocks. 1, 2. And for the second node, go to the Effect tab and search Glow. Apply to a node and adjust two parameters, shine threshold and spread. The values may vary depending on your clip, so move the shine threshold slider back and forth and see where the effect kicks in. In my case, it's around 0.6, so I leave it there. Then come down to spread and type in 0.5. Don't overdo it, just keep it subtle. Once you're happy with that, why not put two nodes into one compound node and name it HRO, highlight roll off. And this is totally optional, but as a final touch, I add another node for more contrast in the shadows, since it looks a little bit lifted. Go to Curve and click on the three dots and turn on Editable Splines. Select the bottom dot and grab the one end and drag it like so. There you have it. That's what I do at phase 3. But we haven't finished yet, because this LUT, ARRI Perceptual LUTs 5500 Kelvin normal, is made for normal daylight scenes. If the subject is in an open shade, they are lit by different quality of daylight. More specifically, they are lit by bluish daylight, and the skin tones sometimes tend to look pale. So we have to counteract that, and that's where another LUT comes in. ARRI Perceptual LUTs 5500 Kelvin, open shade reddish. This LUT is made to add back some of the red lost in the open shade daylight spectrum, so that skin tones look healthier. The difference is subtle, but it's enough to notice. This version works well if the subject is under trees or in shade, or when they have yellowish skin tones. Try them for yourself and see which one works better for you. So the reason I chose ACES is because, well, DaVinci Intermediate would have worked just as well for this specific case, but I went with ACES mainly because the LUT and grading should hold up, even if more of the industry shifts towards ACES down the road. So you might be wondering, is there any difference in images between Resolve Color Management and ACES? Yes, ACES tends to be slightly more contrasting than RCM, Resolve Color Management. It's more of a preference. Some people don't like this contrasted look from the get-go, while others actually prefer this contrasted look because it feels more manageable to grade. There is a way to bypass this contrasted look from ACES, but I went simple this time. Up to this point, I've been talking about version 1.2, but since I started making this video about 4 months ago, there's already version 2.1 released, and this version improved the overall color accuracy. It requires less manual adjustment in phase 3, which relies on ARRI color experience. Let me explain some of the changes I did. So previous version 1.2 had some problems. The biggest one is the strong green effect, which has to be tamed by adding some magenta, about +7 depending on the scene, or tweaking the hue and saturation in the blue and green range. Another thing is the brightness in red and yellow range. Version 1.2 makes highly saturated red to yellow darker than other colors. They look denser and richer, which sounds nice, but in terms of recreating ARRI color, it should be fixed. These problems mostly arise from phase 2 interpolation process, which is based on analyzing the patterns of how ARRI interprets color in various situations and reflect the result from phase 1 mathematical conversion, but they kind of fight each other and makes the color less accurate. Going back to the issue of version 1.2 making the red and yellow darker, version 2.1 does the opposite. It makes them brighter and lighter. Why is that? This is an important point, but ARRI Alexa with previous color science is not really true to how our eyes and brain perceive color in terms of brightness, how we perceive RGB. Human eyes are most sensitive to green, then red, and blue. But previous ARRI color science didn't map the brightness value of RGB based on how our eyes perceive, as ARRI admits. As a result, RGB brightness looks uneven to us. Most notably, green and red channels look brighter, which can be considered as a character, but thought to be a technical flaw, and ARRI fixed that later in ARRI New Color Science, Reveal Color Science. But this video is based on the older color science with that character. And that's part of the reason why the picture looks brighter across the board when you apply these LUTs, since RGB combines to make all the colors. And version 2.1 reflects that to highly saturated colors from red to yellow as well. Before I wrap up, let me take a quick detour into human color perception, since it's actually a key to understanding ARRI's new color science as well as the old one. Humans perceive color through cone cells in the retina. They're the kind of cells that respond to different wavelengths of light. We have 3 kinds, L, M, and S. L stands for long wavelength, M stands for medium wavelength, and S stands for short wavelength. Each one peaks at different point in the visible spectrum. L peaks around orange to yellow-green, M peaks around green, and S peaks around blue to violet. And we perceive full color by combining signals from these 3 LMS. So why did we evolve to weigh green and red so heavily? One hypothesis from evolutionary biology is that primates like us needed to spot red and orange fruit against a green forest background. And we had back then only had L and S, and we couldn't tell apart. So a new M cone branched off from the existing L cone, and it became possible to tell green and orange more easily. But as a byproduct, because M and L ended up sitting together in this wavelength range, we tend to perceive colors sitting in this wavelength range as brighter because there are more sensitivity in this range compared to blue range. And that's why in terms of RGB, R and G reads more brighter to us, and blue is
not so much.
The workflow I shared in this video is just one approach I've been developing for the past few years. And these LUTs are not perfect, and they never will be for every situation. But they're always evolving. Every time I find something new about ARRI color and the way to achieve it, I update them. This is version 1.2, and there will be more versions, there will be more updates in the future. I also need to work on LED and tungsten versions too. And I want to do the same for other cameras like Lumix, Canon, Red, you know. But projects like this take months of preparation and experiment. So if you found this helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. These actions help the algorithm to push this video to more people. And the more support this video gets, the more time and resource I can put back into projects like this. Well, not just these kind of projects, I want to cover topics like spectral distribution, skin tones, lighting, as well as camera gears. I also want to talk about ARRI's look mystery I still can't figure out to this day. There are so many topics I want to cover, and I want to do them all slightly from different perspective. Alright, that's a wrap. I'm Wade, and I'll see you in the next one.